Hey, I'm Heather and welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is a place where I coach busy moms who want to grow their business with more heart and less hustle. First of all, thank you so much for all of your love and encouragement on my last week's episode. If you didn't watch it, my husband and I shared some big news for our family, and I loved and appreciated all of your comments and your support. So many of you were saying that it was just really inspiring to see somebody still pursuing adventure, even amidst this crazy last year and a half that we've experienced. When we continued to believe that it was possible to have adventure and to see the world, even in the current situation, that's when our belief of what was possible unlocked the creativity to think of going to a different province. It affords us the ability to have so much adventure and see more of the world without having to leave the country. So we're really excited and we wanted to thank you for all of your love and support. Today, I want to talk to you about why we get triggered and what to do when we get triggered. Now, for myself personally, and I've shared this over the last few weeks, my business is the number one thing that's triggering me right now, and particularly the growth or the speed of growth in my business. I also talked recently on Instagram about how we often get triggered by people that we're following on social media. And I started a conversation about muting and unfollowing people and sometimes feeling tempted to go back and look at those people's accounts. And I wanted to share some of my thoughts on that as well. What's a trigger and what to do when we get triggered and why sometimes removing the trigger isn't the solution. First of all, I want to start with answering the question, what is a trigger? Now, this is language that I think is used quite often in the mental and emotional health world, but might feel foreign to some people. A trigger is essentially something that happens circumstantially that triggers a thought pattern that already exists in our brains. Many of our thought patterns, the neural pathways, are formed when we are between the ages of 0 and 7. So we have a lot of these default ways of thinking that are programmed into our brain. Now, the beautiful thing about the brain is that it's neuroplastic, and that means that any neural pathway can be rewired in just 63 days. But if we don't know that that default setting exists, if we're not aware of it, then we won't be able to change it. A circumstance will happen that will then trigger a thought that will create an emotional response in our bodies. What we experience from the outside, usually what we're aware of, is the trigger and the feeling. Most of us notice that this process has happened when we notice that we're not feeling awesome. We're feeling upset, we're feeling anxious, we're feeling frustrated, whatever the emotion is. That's usually when we become aware that we've been triggered. But what's happening here is that the circumstance is not creating the emotion, right? In the middle, and I've talked about this many times before, but in the middle is a thought. In the middle is that default setting thought that we have probably thought for years and years and years and we're not even aware of. It's in our subconscious. So I'm going to give you an example using the whole idea of social media. You wake up in the morning and you're scrolling on your phone, which, by the way, I have recently moved my phone across the room to my desk so that I can't look at it in the morning. I would highly recommend moving your phone away from your bedside table. If you're like me and you've known for years you want to change that habit and you haven't changed it yet. You wake up in the morning and you're scrolling on your phone and you go to someone's feed that starts talking about how their business is growing and how amazing they're doing and how awesome their life is, and you notice yourself feeling jealous. And the only thing that alerts you to this whole process is how you suddenly feel. Now, what a lot of us do is we start feeling upset or anxious or jealous or whatever, and then we just keep going through our entire day with that emotion underlying and fueling everything that we're doing. That's not a happy way to live, to just live in reaction to our emotions. And I have learned is that when I start to feel upset or I start to feel jealous, I ask myself, what happened and what did I make it mean? Those two questions are really powerful. What happened and what did I make it mean? What happened is identifying the circumstance or the trigger, and what did I make it mean is identifying the story or the thought. The trigger was I was scrolling on social media. I saw this particular person's post. I saw how amazing her business is doing, how much she's growing, how happy and excited she is, how beautiful she is. And I thought, she is doing better than I am. She has something I don't have. And then I felt jealous. This trigger itself is neutral. The trigger isn't the problem. This person on social media isn't the problem. The thought, the story that I'm telling myself is the thing that I have control over and is the thing that ultimately I want to change. I don't want that default setting. I don't want to feel jealous when I look at somebody succeeding in their business. So I have two options at this point. Option number one is I can unfollow or mute her, right? So that I don't get triggered by what she's posting. That I think is an okay option. It's sometimes the kindest thing that we can do to ourselves, especially if we're in a space in our life where we don't have time or the capacity to be processing a lot of emotion. Ultimately, muting or unfollowing her is not going to solve the problem. Why? Because she is the neutral circumstance. She's just the trigger. The thought, the default setting thought in my brain that when someone else is succeeding, it means that there is less for me or that I'm not doing as well, that's the real problem. And that's where we have control. And what I would like to offer to you today is that dealing with that story is more powerful than eliminating the trigger. Because the truth is that if I have a story in my head, a lack-based story, a scarcity story, that whenever someone else succeeds, it means there's less for me, that story is going to get triggered from all kinds of different things and different people. Even if I remove this person from social media, that story still lives inside of me. So if I really want to gain freedom from that trigger, it's helpful to keep having that trigger in my life, because then I can do the work of changing the story. Then I can practice believing a different thought when I see that person in my feed. So the big question, should I mute and unfollow or not? A lot of people believe that it's the best thing to do for yourself to mute and unfollow. And I would say that it's a kind thing to do. But if your goal is growth, if your goal is to become the next version of yourself, to become a bigger person on the inside, then I have a challenge for you. And that challenge is that instead of muting and unfollowing people, what if you just decided that you were going to do the work of changing the story that you were telling yourself about what that trigger means? Let me paint a picture for you. When you do that work and when you start to tell yourself a different story, for example, when you start to tell yourself, when she succeeds, it's just an example of what's possible for me too. If it can happen for her, it can happen for me. Then every single time you see her feed and you see her stories and you get triggered, you get to choose a different thought. You get to rewire your brain with an abundant mindset thought. And then you get to feel how that feels. And for a while, you're going to have both thoughts happening. You're going to have the old scarcity thought saying, if she succeeds, there's not enough for me. And you're going to have the new abundant thought saying, if it can happen for her, it can happen for me too. But having that person in your feed is actually going to be the perfect curriculum for you to grow and evolve into the next version of yourself. So, is it wrong to unfollow and mute? No, it's not wrong. It's actually a kindness that you can give yourself if you're in a season where you don't have the capacity to focus on that internal growth in that area of your life. But if you feel up for the challenge, then you can actually take this as an opportunity to use that trigger to help you grow to be a bigger person on the inside, so that eventually you get to the point where you see her feed and you see her stories and it does not create any negative response inside of you. In fact, it might even create the opposite, where you might start thinking all on your own, this is just an example of what's possible for me. If you found this helpful, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel for more emotional health business tips, and share it with a friend. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Let me know, do you think it's better to mute and unfollow? Do you think it's better to keep that person in your feed? Which one are you more drawn to in this season of your life and why? I hope you have a great week and we will talk to you soon.